this book that I'll be speaking about in particular, certain musicians that I've featured is called, like was mentioned, The Call of Music. And it celebrates the varied and diverse journeys of very different musicians, contemporary living musicians who are come from different backgrounds. Some are musicians from families that are legacy, hereditary musicians. Some are first generation musicians, of course, and they vary in terms of their backgrounds and economic backgrounds as well as social and religious backgrounds. But what really binds or is the common thread between many of these artists is this search for their voice, their artistic calling, their musical approach, their musical way of thinking. And this is often shaped by many of the circumstances and the nature of their individual journeys, and even the nature of the way they view aesthetics and music. So I was personally very inspired. Some of these musicians have been part of my journey, have been people I have interacted with or learned from. Some are others who I've met along the way. And I found their stories quite compelling and inspirational. And as was mentioned, many are hidden. Some are certainly very well-established musicians, and all are very seriously dedicated, but kind of quietly doing this work with a tremendous focus and discipline. So I was keen to write this book to share these stories with people who may be interested. So I will just start my screen share. So just before I begin speaking about some of the musicians, and in particular, I'll be only speaking about the musicians in the book who are from Mumbai, because obviously that is a lot of the theme that we are kind of exploring. And Mumbai is also a very fascinating site of a lot of creative and cross-pollination in the history of Hindustani music. I wanted to just share a little bit about how I began this process of writing the book and my musical journey and what led me to Mumbai and these musicians. So I would say about over 20 years ago, when I, at the late age of about 22, began studying Hindustani music, because prior to that I had been training in Carnatic music. I met my guru, who was in Bangalore at the time, and through many lessons and exchanges with her, I was very drawn by her style. My guru's name is Vidushi Aditi Kaikini Upadhyaya. I decided to come to India and train with her in a more long-term fashion. Although I hadn't defined this, I was just exploring. So this kind of training involved, of course, living with her family, very immersive style of learning music. And as a result, a part of the immersion, and in addition to the lessons and of course the imparting of musical knowledge, was being part of a musical culture and becoming very familiar with the culture of music, which involved attending concerts, interacting with musicians, and traveling to festivals in many parts of the country, because you really see how Hindustani music is thriving in many pockets of the country, not just in the big halls that are also can be vibrant, but there's a different experience to a quality of experience to all of these. So this was all part of the kind of the seeds that she had planted in my training process. So one part of this was visiting her father, Pandit Dinkar Kaikini, as was mentioned, an Agra Gharana vocalist and a very kind of leading vocalist of Mumbai for many years. And I would come to Mumbai, to his home in Gamdevi, actually like in the very beautiful lanes of Gamdevi near Mani Bhavan, just one lane away. And I would be visiting him, spending time with him, training with him, also talking about many questions around music and his thoughts about musical approaches. Kaikini ji and his wife, Shashikala ji, have been very big figures in Bharatiya Vidya Bhavan in Chowpatty, Mumbai. They were both principal. He was principal for since the 80s, and then she was also principal for another 20 years till early 2000s when she retired. So the culture of their home was often filled with students, artists, and these were kind of my initial exposure to like I said, the culture and also the experiences of many musicians and students who are on this path. And that was something that I was kind of a silent observer of these things for some time, and I found it quite fascinating. In this process, of course, I met also his son, Pandit Yogesh Samsi, who is a very, very renowned tabla player, a very well-known tabla player in the current Hindustani music world. Yogesh ji lived with his parents, both vocalists. He's a tabla player and he is my guru's brother. And his students too were often in and out of the home, and many stories were shared about ustads of the earlier years, or funny anecdotes in the process of learning, and all these kind of ideas. So this is when I first met Yogesh ji. And over the years of many years now of my association with this family, I have learned quite more about his journey as an artist. And he's actually the last artist I feature in the book, but the first who I'd like to share today, because he's the first artist who I began actually inspired this collection of essays. Yogesh ji's trajectory is very fascinating. He was, of course, born to two musicians, and at the age of 2, when his parents were at that time, the family lived in Delhi. Kaikini ji was a composer and producer for All India Radio. The family was listening to a national broadcast because Kaikini ji had to review these and evaluate them for his job. At the age of 2, when he heard this broadcast, and there was always a tabla set at home, he literally stood on his knees and started to play. Accompanying the vocalist, Malavika Kannan was singing Rag Chayanat. And as a 2-year-old, he played an entire radio broadcast and accompanying her from start to finish, as though in the flourishes and the maturity of what other, a tabla player who would have learned for many years would have done. So this was the first moment in which the family realized that there's something very extraordinary here. This is not just a regular kind of talent. Then over the years, the family moved to Mumbai, and at that point, slowly Kaikini ji kind of realized that he wanted to put his son into training with a guru. During a musical event at a patron's house, Kaikini ji met Ustad Allah Rakha Khan Sahab, a famous tabla artist, father of Ustad Zakir Hussain, and who was really a maverick for the Punjab Gharana of tabla, which I'll speak about in a few moments. So Kaikini ji asked Abbaji, as he was called by those who are very familiar with him, if he would meet his son and at least just assess him and see if he would take him on as a student. Abbaji and Zakir ji came to their home and just to meet the child, and then he started to ask him to play. He recited certain compositions or phrases. He would ask him to play it, repeat and play, repeat and play. This went on, and Yogesh ji was, like I said, he was just 9 years old, but he was able to kind of keep up and repeat and play whatever he was asking in that moment. So after this meeting, they went home. Nothing was really said. Everybody was just, pleasantries were exchanged. Then he called a few days later asking the family to come to his house. And when they arrived, they saw the whole house was, like there was a function happening. The furniture was moved. There were so many guests, artists. So the Kaikini family was a little bit taken aback. They thought maybe this is the wrong day. We didn't come on the right date. But then Abbaji said, no, this is the right day. We've organized the Ganda Bandhan for Yogesh. And that's a traditional ceremony in which the guru is tied to the shishya. And publicly, it's a public announcement, kind of formally accepting a disciple. And there are other artists are witness to that, and there's a little bit of music played. It's a very significant moment in this traditional model of learning. So that is how this relationship began. And in this photo, this is much later, of course, you see that is Yogesh ji and Ustad Allah Rakha Khan Sahab. And their association was of, I think, 25 years. The training was a very, very rigorous process in which Yogeshji describes, and I write about it in detail in the book, the kind of depth and intensity of the training, which he was there almost daily. Although he didn't live with his guru, he was constantly there. He would be monitored. Even if he was not in the class, he would be practicing, and Abbaji would be hearing it. He would tell stories of, Abbaji had a garage in the bottom of his kind of flat apartment building where many students would go to practice. And in those days, I mean, even now, of course, there's no fan, and in the Mumbai heat, all these students are practicing and really sweating it out as they practice tabla. Then going back up, Abbaji would constantly be giving feedback and giving them more and more challenging things to keep pushing the students. And in particular, Yogeshji, most of his training happened one-on-one like this. And in those days, I mention this because now so much has changed. I could say this as a student of music and a teacher, and they didn't allow write or record anything. I mean, of course, recording facilities were still just being kind of coming about, but so the demand on the student is high, that to pick up, to retain, to be extremely alert in the process of training. And this process went on basically for 25 years, and Yogeshji shares this in great detail. And one of the very interesting things about their style of tabla is, like I mentioned, it is the Punjab Gharana style of tabla. Many of the compositions and repertoire of this gharana were actually lost during partition. Many of the Punjab Gharana musicians stayed in Pakistan. So Abbaji was one of the few who was in India, and he taking forward whatever he had learned, but also innovating on it in a way that was a very, I would say he was a maverick for his gharana, envisioning rhythmic ideas that were very unconventional, and exploring divisions of rhythm that were very complex, but also aesthetically very appealing. And this is what, the kind of essence of this is what he imparted to his students and to Yogeshji. And Yogeshji takes this ahead in his own work as an artist and as a guru. He teaches many students in Mumbai and from around the country and the world. I would say in a very similar fashion, although times have changed, with a similar intensity and a very openness of sharing. All his students are professional tabla players. He only teaches them, and many of them are also very the next generation of very promising and sought after tabla artists. One thing that's also important to mention is tabla, the art of tabla, of course, includes solo playing and accompaniment. And accompaniment is a type, in the training of tabla, you're largely taught repertoire, but for accompaniment, especially for vocal or instrumental music, that's not something that is taught so much. It's something that is only learned through experience. And because Yogeshji was the son of course, a vocalist, and at home the atmosphere was a constant, vocal music was a big part of their mahol at home. He has had since his childhood a lot of experience and thought has gone into the aesthetics of vocal accompaniment. This picture is a picture of him accompanying his father, Pandit Dinkar Kaikini, and on the tanpura is Pandit Sudhindra Bhaumik, interestingly, who I'll speak about next. So he is very sought after as a vocal accompanist as well as an instrumental accompanist. So these are just some various aspects of the tabla, the art of tabla, and his journey as a tabla musician. There's so much more to say, but I would like to talk a little bit about everybody. So in the interest of time, I will move ahead. But before doing that, I would love to share a short clip, an excerpt of one of his tabla solos. This is in London, in which he's reciting a composition which is known as Padhant, and then he plays it on the tabla.
धा धा न धा ता धा ता धा तेरे गिड़ ता गिड़ तेरे गिड़ ता गिड़ तेरे गिड़ ते ते का ता ते का ता गति गिड़ मगे तेरे गिड़ धा दिन ता तेरे गिड़ धा 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 गिड़ मगे तेरे गिड़ धा दिन ता तेरे गिड़ धा 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 गिड़ मगे तेरे गिड़ धा दिन ता तेरे गिड़ धा 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 न धा ता धा ता धा तेरे गिड़ ता गिड़ तेरे गिड़ ता गिड़ तेरे गिड़ ते ते का ता गति गिड़ मगे तेरे गिड़ धा दिन ता तेरे गिड़ धा 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 गिड़ मगे तेरे गिड़ धा दिन ता तेरे गिड़ धा 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 गिड़ मगे तेरे गिड़ धा दिन ता तेरे गिड़ धा 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 न धा ता धा ता धा तेरे गिड़ ता गिड़ तेरे गिड़ ता गिड़ तेरे गिड़ ते ते का ता गति गिड़ मगे तेरे गिड़ धा दिन ता तेरे गिड़ धा 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 गिड़ मगे तेरे गिड़ धा दिन ता तेरे गिड़ धा 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 गिड़ मगे तेरे गिड़ धा दिन ता तेरे गिड़ धा धा धा
So this is a very short excerpt, of course. A tabla solo is usually over an hour, but I just wanted to give you a flavor of what that would be like. I just wanted to check if the audio and everything is okay. All right. In the process of my learning and this, like I said, my journey with these musicians, I also moved from Bangalore to Mumbai in 2017, and after coming to Mumbai, it was through my guru Aditi ji that I also met and began my association with my other guru, Pandit Sudhindra Bhaumik, who is in these pictures here. Bhaumik ji is a musician with a very different, you could say a very different kind of background than the story you just heard and even the others. He comes, his family was originally in East Pakistan, now Bangladesh, and migrated when he was a child. And in a big family, there were 7 children. He lost his father just a few months after he was born, and his mother was responsible for managing this entire family through many years of great difficulty, migrating to India, to West Bengal. Originally, his family is a family of farmers. His father, the story of his father too is very interesting, who was, like I said, born into a family of farmers, but knew from a young age that he wanted to get an education and do something different. He ran away from home and somehow, literally moving from house to house, doing whatever little jobs he could, managed to educate himself along the way and get a job as a clerk in a government office. But like I mentioned, unfortunately, he passed away at a very young age, and the family was left to really survive through this difficult period. But Bhaumik ji's mother, Bindu Basini, was a very, really phenomenal woman who managed to raise her family and educate all her children, because she was very clear that that was still the priority for them. So he comes from this background in which education was so prioritized, no matter how difficult it was, no matter how tough they were for finances or even food. So he describes all of this in great detail, and eventually all of them have emerged emerged in this dream has come true. They've all educated, they've all come well, and Bhaumik ji himself also has had a prestigious education at institutes like IIT and IIM. But along the way, he always had this love for music. Ever since he was a child, he would always kind of be asking his elder sisters and his cousins and aunts, what is the purpose of life? What am I supposed to be doing here? And that question kind of always nagged at him. And initially, his love for music began with film music and very kind of, he would pick up instruments, guitar, tabla. There was no opportunity to take any lessons. It was not affordable, nor was it even something that was in the realm of possibility. But slowly, as he went to college and he met others, he was exposed to different types of music, including Hindustani classical. And he asked one of his friends, "Oh, what's this kind of music that you're playing?" One of his friends at IIT played sitar. And slowly he started to get kind of acquainted and exposed to this style of music and very curious. And he said, "Where can I learn this? I also want a guru." So his story is interesting because for many years he's searching for a guru. And sometimes different stories of musicians, they find their guru very easily, or their guru is their parent, or their guru is kind of part of their culture. But for some artists, that's absolutely not the case. It takes a long time for them to finally find the guru who is right for them and who will guide them. So in his journey, this is certainly one part of it, where alongside his career, he's looking for a guru. And literally his friend mentioned a guru, and he literally just boarded a train to a different state to meet this person, and without any notice, without telling his family, very, very he just took very immediate decisions to kind of begin this search. However, the first few times he kept trying to meet the gurus he met would say, "Oh, I'm sorry, I don't think this is going to work," for whatever reasons, logistically and otherwise. So he continued his own kind of path of his career, his job, his family. But finally, he got a job in Mumbai. He's a metallurgical engineer by training. And he was in the grind of a job, but that same friend that he met from IITs pointed him to the guru, a guru in Mumbai, Pandit K.G. Ginde. And Pandit K.G. Ginde was a really kind of a huge scholar and a towering figure of music. And when Bhaumikji met him, he immediately recommended that he learn from one of his colleagues, or you could say, Guru Bhai, Pandit S.C.R. Bhatt. So finally, Bhaumikji meets this very knowledgeable and scholastic musician and begins his training. However, like I mentioned, he is married, he has children, and he's learning and doing his job, but somehow life, it's not easy. The life of a musician is not easy. And his job gets transferred, he gets moved around. There's a lot of, I can't give the full story. In fact, he's 2 chapters of this book because his story is extremely compelling. It's almost cinematic in scope, and he's a very radical kind of person in the kind of choices he makes. But I can just say in brief that he faced tremendous hardships. There were days where he said, he was trying to support his family and do a job and do music, and he was constantly pulled between these things. In the middle of all of this, a lot of personal losses in his family. So he learns for some time in Mumbai from Pandit S.C.R. Bhatt and Pandit K.G. Ginde, becomes very immersed in this style of music, also the Agra Gayaki of vocal music. But he has to move to Bangalore because he has to start a family business with his brother. So certain things like this, there's many, many obstacles that keeps seeming to test his commitment to music. Like how far is he willing to go to do this? So he moves to Bangalore, and there also he has a guru, Ram Naik Ji, who also made him pursue him for almost 1 year before accepting him as a student. And here he also learns and kind of develops more in this style of music. He has to move back to Mumbai because of a tragic loss of his brother passes away suddenly. And Bhaumikji realizes at this point in his life that my life is, I want to do music. I cannot do all these other things and do music at the same time. And he asks his wife, "Can you please, would you be okay with this?" And his family supports him. He supports his decision, and he moves to Mumbai. So I'll just tell you, this is a bit of the background of his story, but I've been learning from him for the past 8 years or so. And his life is it's a powerful model of living in that he walks the path. So every time I go to he lives in a very, he's been in the same small room, probably this 100 square foot room for the last 35 years, where he's a minimalist who lives with absolutely the basics, and he just teaches morning to evening. He teaches and he does his own sadhana, and that's the kind of life he has been leading for a very long time now. Many people ask him why he gave up his profession, especially considering the tremendous struggle he went through to get educated in such institutions. But for him, I think it was always very clear that his path was the musical path, and at any cost, he would follow this. And that is kind of the title of the music draws from this idea, the call of music. It's almost something that is external to the individual. They can't even, it's a calling, it's not even a choice at some point. So I'd like to just share a small, just a few sentences from his chapter that give a little glimpse into the kind of hardships he faced. Initially, when he made that final decision to move to Mumbai, and while his family stayed back in Bangalore, he lives here alone. It's a very difficult, to support yourself as a musician, even whether it was in the 80s or 60s or whether it's now. And so he describes this a bit. He says, "Sometimes I went through the day with no money in my pocket, but that didn't bother me. At times I thought to myself, if I don't get any place to stay, I will stay on the platform. I felt a lot of acceptance on my part, and I said okay to whatever life presented. When people suggested that I take academic tuition so I could earn more money, I was very clear that I don't want to do anything else but music. I have tried so many things, but now I will only do this. And from this point, I never tried anything else." So I think there's a lot of kind of churning that goes in this musical process, and to come to these choices and then to live that life. And many of the artists in this book have, in different ways, experienced and grappled with these questions and then come to their own answers. So in Mumbai, Bhaumikji is a very kind of, you could say, lives in great solitude, but teaches very generously and learned from great masters, and is always in the pursuit of knowledge. And that's something that he always shares with his students, that there's never an end to the seeking of knowledge. So I'd like to share a small clip from a recent event. This year was his 80th birthday, and this was a concert in his celebration.
Sahilariya Gavoriya Sahilariya Sahilari Sahilari Sahilariya Gavoriya Sahilariya 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 Gavoriya Sahilariya Gavoriya More Mandare More Mandare More Mandare Mandare Gao Bajao Sute Anand Badai Sahilariya Gavoriya Sahilariya 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 Sahilari Sahilariya 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 Gavoriya Sahilariya 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 Gavoriya Sahilariya Sahilariya Gavoriya lariya. Jaya lariya, jaya lariya, jaya lariya, gavariya, jaya lariya. Jaya lariya, gavariya, jaya lariya, gavariya, jaya lariya, gavariya, more mandare, more mandare, more mandare. More mandare, more mandare, more mandare, mogal gao bajao sukho badhai sahelariya gauriya.
Now I'd like to speak a little bit about another musician who I met in the process of writing this book and then later actually began to learn from after interacting with her and being very, taken by her thought and approach to music, and that is Shubha Joshi. The first time I met her, Shubhaji lives in Kandivli and originally born in Ujjain, but she has been in Mumbai for many years, since her childhood, when her family used to live in Borivali and then Kandivli. The first time I reached her house, I kind of saw through the grill of her door. All I could see was a picture of Vidushi Shobha Gurtuji, who is a very famous Thumri queen, Thumri expert, master. And so I knew I was at the right place because literally that's the first thing you see is this beautiful picture of Shobha Gurtuji and her tanpura, which is on all the time, the electronic tanpura. So this is kind of floating through the air, the strain of the tanpura, and I met her because I was very keen. I had heard about her through some of my other musical friends and my gurus, and her life was also a very different story that had a focus on the genre of Thumri, Dadra, and other genres of music in addition to Khayal, which I found very interesting. And she too has been a musician working very, very dedicatedly for, her whole life in a very, in her demeanor of tremendous humility and modesty. And I was really taken by the simplicity in which her being was and the depth of her music at the same time. So Shubhaji comes, like I said, from a family not of musicians but music lovers. Her father was a professor of philosophy and literature and master of many languages. She mentions he knew Russian and French, and he was a professor at Mumbai University, and they moved as a family when she was quite young to Borivali. When she grew up, she was surrounded by a culture of a lot of music. Her father was very keen, so they would listen at home to the radio a lot. She grew up loving film music, a lot of old Hindi film music. They would attend mehfils, they would host baithaks at their home. So music was definitely a vibrant part of her life, though neither of her parents were musicians. And her father had a very keen ear for music, so he would attend concerts, and he attended one concert of Ustad Aman Ali Khan Sahab, who was a master of the Bhendi Bazar Gharana, an interesting gharana that has its origins specifically in Mumbai. That's probably another talk in itself, or it might have been done already in Kaki's talks. So he was so drawn to this style that he immediately went to Aman Ali Khan Sahab and asked him if he would teach him and his family. And he passed him on to one of his senior disciples, Master Pandurang Ambedkar. So this is how Shubhaji and her sister began their talim. They would go from their home all the way to, I believe, Grant Road to learn from him, home in Kandivli to Grant Road, and she was started with the basics in Khayal, of course, and for many years she trained in this fashion. and his style of teaching was very geared towards drawing students in. So rather than making them repeat route exercises or things like that could get a little bit mundane, he would take songs that were familiar or that were rooted in classical music and draw them in, and then start to impart more of the classical material. So she trained like this in music, but one thing that was always kind of in the back of her mind was that something was different about her voice, because she grew up listening to film music, and the quality of voice that you hear in like Lata Mangeshkar ji, another female artist, that was very, higher tone, higher pitch, and a different quality of texture. And Shobha ji has a very deep and kind of heavy voice. And so she always felt that no matter how beautifully she was replicating these songs, she could never kind of sound like that. And this search for her voice was something that was constantly kind of on her mind. Later on, when she studied music in college and in her master's as well at SNDT, she had a moment, I would say it was probably a kind of life-changing moment for her, when she attended a concert of Shobha Gurtu ji that was organized by the university. And she says literally, a light bulb just went off in my head, because for the first time she heard somebody who had a voice like hers, and she felt this sense of, even I can belong, there's a place for my voice in this musical world too. Everything doesn't have to have this typical, what you would say, feminine sound. And so after hearing Shobha ji's voice, she was completely just kind of mesmerized, and she started to kind of seek her for training. It took some time, but eventually she began her training under her. And until then, she had done Khayal, of course, and whatever she knew of Thumri was things she had picked up just by listening. So under Shobha ji, she began a 10-year-long training of just Thumri, Dadra, Kajri, all these forms that are, I mentioned this in the book, that are labeled sometimes as light, but this term is very, I would say, unfair and misleading about these genres, because they require just as much specialization and training and tremendous work to master, as much as Khayal and Dhrupad and the other forms that we have in Hindustani music. So her training with Shobha ji was, again, immersive. A lot of also, of course, going to her and learning, and also performing with her on stage. And she says that so much of what I learned was actually on stage, because on stage she saw the way Shobha ji would perform, the kind of selections she would make, and how she interacted with her accompanists, and how she created this kind of energy, a magical spell, I would say, in her concerts that would draw the audiences in from start to finish. And this is something that Shobha ji experienced firsthand, and was really that's something that she took with her for life. As she was training with Shobha ji, she began her professional career. One small anecdote I'd like to share that I forgot to mention is when she started her training in Thumri, or when she spoke to her father and said, I want to learn from Shobha Gurtu and Thumri, initially he opposed this and said, how will you sing Thumri? You're not a married woman, and typically, these are all amorous, romantic kind of texts that they sing. And she replied to him immediately, but there are so many married women who sing Thumri too. It doesn't mean they're capturing those sentiments any more or less than a person who isn't. So she was very stubborn, and she says this about herself, that when she wanted something, she was very stubborn about doing it. And she believes that the spirit of Thumri is something that it's not that you have to, in any kind of genre, something that you have to have lived and experienced. It's something you have to imagine and emotionally relate to. And so this is how she has lived her musical life, because at each leg of her journey, she has explored different genres this way. So while as her professional career as a musician began, she would perform a lot Khayal Khayal and Thumri. She was a part of the Akashvani choir. She did many, many recordings for the radio. And in those recordings, she had to learn many different genres, folk songs, languages from all different regions of the country. So it's a tremendous, this is a tremendous vocal skill. I can say that as a student of vocal music, to use your voice for so many different styles of singing, especially when you're used to one way of singing, if you've trained for many years, takes a lot of vocal dexterity and a lot of awareness of how you're going to keep changing your voice to create the sound that you're aiming for, and to capture the aesthetic of those genres. Otherwise, they all tend to sound similar. So this is something she excels in tremendously, and that's due to her own tremendous attention to detail and keen listening and then execution of that, in addition to her training. So she learned, and she would do radio programs, recordings, concerts. And as she did more radio programs, she was getting more opportunities to sing ghazal. And she learned ghazal from Shobhaji, but she realized she wanted more repertoire. And when she mentioned this to Shobha Gurtuji, she only told her, then if you want to learn more of this, you have to go to Ustad Taj Ahmad Khan Sahab, who was a leading ghazal composer and singer in Mumbai. So Shobhaji approached him, and this also was an interesting kind of back and forth. For about 6 months, she would keep going and visiting him, and she made it very clear she wanted to learn, but he didn't immediately take her on. He just kept kind of saying, we'll see, until finally she really had to kind of more forcefully ask him, are you going to teach me or not? And then he too agreed and did also a Ganda Bandhan for her, she remembers, in which he taught her a ghazal in Megh Malhar. So this is the beginning of her association with Taj Ahmad Khan Sahab, which was a very different training than Shobha Gurtuji. She tells the story of learning from him, very interesting, how he lived in Mahim, and he would ask her to come at 11 o'clock in the morning, and usually he would still be in bed, just kind of getting up, then having chai 3-4 times, nashta, having his, so it was very leisurely pace, and she would just have to be in this atmosphere, be with his family, be in the culture of their language. At home they all spoke Urdu. So I mention this because nowadays the pace in which we learn and the concept of time that we have when we go for a lesson or we teach a lesson, we do 2 to 3 o'clock or 3 to 3:45, whatever. But in those days, you had to just block off a day. She knew if I'm going to learn from Khan Sahab, that day it's blocked. I'll just be with him. I'll learn. I'll probably have a lot of other interactions. He might recite some shairi, and I'll be in that mahal. And that was the process. The process is slow and detailed, and it's of course there's learning of music, but it's also just being in this atmosphere and absorbing a lot of things that are unspoken also. So she learned from him also for another 10 years. And she said, I remember once she told me, half of my life has gone into learning, because she wanted to learn all these forms, not just do it in a haphazard manner. So these kind of stories I find very fascinating, because this process of learning that we prioritize, and for all these musicians, there's no payoff. They're not looking for this quote unquote ideas of success or fame or monetary success. They're so pulled into the musical practice that itself is the payoff. And they've all said that in different ways in their own words, that being in this process has given them so much, and the sharing of it, they all teach, is also equally fulfilling. So this is a little bit about Shubha Joshi. I would like to play a small clip of a Thumri sung by her.
बतिया हमसे हो काहे बनाओ झूठी बतिया हमसे मैं तो जीती हूँ मैं तो जीती हूँ तोरे दम से काहे बनाओ झूठी बतिया हमसे काहे बनाओ झूठी बतिया हमसे बतिया बना हमसे झूठी बतिया बतिया रे काहे बनाओ झूठी बतिया हमसे
I would urge everybody here to later on, please listen to these artists. They're on YouTube because these are such short clips. It pains me to stop it, but if they're all on YouTube, so if any of them interests you, to please listen in more at more leisure. I'll speak about one more musician from this collection, and then maybe we can go to questions. Kala Ramnath ji, a Hindustani violinist, comes from a family of multi-generational musicians. And very interesting, I didn't want to miss her story because the connection to Mumbai is very interesting. Her family were Carnatic vocalists in the Travancore court. Once the court kind of, the patronage of music dissolved, her grandfather, T.A. Narayana Iyer, who's in this picture here, moved to Mumbai because he got a job as a clerk in a government office here. But he was still very much completely, musically in his mind and his practice. He was completely immersed in music. But he had to move to Mumbai. And it turned out to be a very interesting, I think, pivotal choice because firstly, he was the first in his family to switch from vocal music to the violin. And secondly, when he came to Mumbai, he interacted and there was a lot of exchange between him and other Hindustani musicians, Paluska ji, Bhatkarne ji, Pandit Omkar Nath Thakur ji. And as a result, he had his own capacity for understanding. He already had his knowledge of Carnatic music and his understanding of Hindustani were critical because he trained all his children and they are some of the greatest violinists of our country today. So had he, firstly, had he not changed to violin, perhaps the lineage would have been very different. And had he not moved to Mumbai, maybe we wouldn't have his daughter, the great N. Rajamji, who's a Hindustani violinist, would have been a Carnatic violinist. And her daughters and her granddaughters are all Hindustani violinists. And Kalaji is also a Hindustani violinist. So like I said, his decision to come to Mumbai and be part of this musical culture and find his own balance of both these styles is very interesting. And he is a big figure in Kalaji's life. By the time she was born, he had moved back to Chennai and he took her under his wing in a remarkable way. I think at the age of 4, he started teaching her, and you see that picture of her with a violin. It's almost bigger than her. But she tells a story of how he would wake her up at 5 o'clock and make her repeat, the exercises. She had to repeat it 100 times, and if she made a mistake, she'd have to go back to the beginning and repeat it all over again. And in this manner, she had a very, very kind of rigorous training. But she says that she didn't ever she never felt coerced into doing this because he had a very gentle way of dealing with her as a child and cajoling her and giving her little treats after she did well, and also taking care of her otherwise in her school and basically completely grooming her. It's a very remarkable story that she says her childhood was mostly just practice and school. And practicing was like, she says, practicing is just like taking a bath or brushing your teeth. You just never think about it, and it's never missed. She said, unless I was sick, I was never allowed to miss practice. And here you see this picture of her diary, actually, a diary he kept for her, and the rags are listed, and he's keeping a track of what she's practiced and which dates, and this is November. So very systematic way of training her. She says that she really idolized her aunt and Rajamji, who lived in Banaras by the time she was growing up. So during the summers, sometimes she would visit her and play with her and her cousin Sangeeta Shankarji, and this is how she started to kind of slowly begin performing as a young musician. One of the, so she began, this was her kind of path of training, and then it was later in her musical career that, or I would say not later, in her maybe late teens, that she faced a great personal loss when her father suddenly passed away of a heart attack. And during this time, her father was also a musician. He was a violinist and composer. Many musicians came to her house to condole, and at that time, Ustad Zakir Hussain also came, who had a relationship with their family, in which he advised her and said, if you, who are you? You can't just sound like your aunt. You have to you have to be your own musician. You have to find your own voice. So she shares how this moment was like a very pivotal and probably, critical moment in her career, because she thought, what am I going to do? Because music has been my life, and how do I distinguish myself, or what can I do? So she ruminated on this thought, and she was grateful to him for having guided her this way. And later on, she eventually came to Pandit Jasraj Ji, whom she decided to learn from, and she plays Gayaki Ang, and Gayaki Ang is essentially vocal music. And she says, I don't call it Gayaki Ang, it's Gayaki. She says, when I play, I'm singing in my head. She's literally, many instrumentalists don't necessarily relate to the words or the text, they're just thinking of notes. But for her, she said, she's thinking of the compositions, the words, and that's how she emotes and improvises. So under Jasraj Ji, she had a very, I would say, intense period of closely studying his music, where she says for some, maybe 6 months, she said all night I was constantly listening even to his recordings and trying to accompany. And in the process of accompanying him, she developed new techniques of fingering techniques that helped her kind of, I would say, to get a smoother transition in the way vocal music is done, that sometimes doesn't always translate into instrumental music. So she studied the technique and the aesthetics of the sound very, very closely. She also performed a lot with Jasraj Ji accompanying him, and in this process learned a lot about, again, his Gayaki, and also how she was going to translate it onto the instrument. That translation is her thought and reflection, and it's gone with a lot of kind of experimentation. Her tone is one of the most famous things about her music, and she's experimented a lot with the strings that she used. And after trying different strings, she realized that viola strings were the best for the kind of sound that she wanted to produce. She didn't want to use a thinner string, like a regular violin string that she felt was too shrill. So these are all the kind of, I share this because I find it interesting what artists are kind of doing. This is a very, this tradition is has a lot of prescription around what we can do, what we cannot do, what are the rules. Certainly we have to follow the rules of the rag, we have to follow certain things, but where do the artists find their individuality within this, even if we are improvising? Where can we add our own element? And so each artist in this collection has kind of, is searching for that and has found it, or is doing it in different ways. So in her context, I think her innovations with the instrument are definitely her ways of exploring her tone and her style. And Kalaji has done a lot of collaborative music with orchestras and filmmakers and different ensembles, where she maintains her approach as a classical artist, but finds a space within a different genre of music. So she has shared many of these instances as well. But, one last anecdote I'd like to share about her, especially because we're talking about her in the context of Mumbai. She told me the story of her debut performance in Mumbai, which was at Dinanath Mangeshkar Hall in Ville Parle. And it was a very big deal. She said we invited so many people, and it was like the first time she was playing a solo here, and only 12 people showed up, and many of you know that's a very big hall. And so she talks about how it was just devastating, and it was something she would have worked really hard and practiced so much and prepared for. However, amongst those 12 people, one of the audience members was a director of CBS Records at the time, and as a result of that performance, she got her first recording contract. So she says that, whenever I play for an audience, that it was such an important lesson, she says, she carries today. Whether it's a small group or it's a large audience, it doesn't matter to me. Somebody's come to listen, and I will do my best. And this kind of, I guess, that's the kind of effort that many artists like to put out, because the art matters to them. And sometimes it's not tangible what we see and what we experience. It might, to an outsider, it might seem a certain way, but to the artist, each experience is significant. These are just some anecdotes that there are many more, and there are so many artists. Of course, this is just 8 musicians I shared about, and there's so many more in this field that I think it's just important to document and share. When people wonder if classical music, what is the state of classical music? So many questions like this come up, but I feel that these stories are important to remind us of what artists go through to make their art, and we shouldn't forget it when we listen or we go to a concert, and it's just in a moment we might pass a judgment, but decades of work has gone into that. So I think it's just to give another perspective of the life of an artist. If there are any questions, we can.
Thank you so much, Priya. You transported us into this world of music with your brilliantly articulated and presentation, and with the gold dust of the audios that you threw in for us. Little breadcrumbs so that we can go back and listen to lots more. Thank you so much for that. I just want to say that how the penny drops when you talk about the call of music with his story. I think it was just so beautifully narrated, because the title of your book is now so clear and loud. Thank you so much for that. There are a few questions, but tell us, could you give us just an outline of the Hindustani classical music, and where are the centers in the country where we can, find performances and performers both?
Yes. So in India, of course, Maharashtra, West Bengal, a lot of Hindustani music happens in these 2 states. Mumbai, Pune, definitely Kolkata. But also in many satellite cities, second-tier cities. I wish it was I wish I had a more organized answer for your question. For instance, I find that the Carnatic music scene is very centralized, geographically centralized in Chennai, and the venues and everything. There's a lot, it's a bit more concrete. But Hindustani music, there are in Mumbai, of course, there's NCPA, one of the oldest institutions that has been promoting classical music, but also many other sabhas in the suburbs and in smaller areas that are doing, another Dadar Matunga Cultural Center, very old, but and consistently presenting artists of all different levels, younger, upcoming artists, senior artists. There are sabhas in Santa Cruz, Suburban Music Circle. There's now we have like newer venues like the Ambani Center, but in Ville Parle, Santa Cruz, in Thane, there's a lot of small concerts happening. I think there are WhatsApp groups, I hate to say, but WhatsApp groups are usually the way in which a lot of the information is more consolidated. If anybody's interested to get on those lists, I'm happy to share that.
Do share, and I really wish we had the culture of the musical month celebration like Chennai does. I think,
Yeah.
though we do have lots of sort of programs, October to March, but it would be really nice to have it as a festival together.
Yeah, we have, I mean, so the Hindustani music season is basically starts around November, December, until Feb. There's a lot of, that's the peak of the music season. And of course, there are big festivals like Savai Gandharv and Dover Lane in Kolkata and Harivallabh in Punjab, in Jalandhar. So there are some very big iconic festivals, definitely, that are very, it's an experience to go to those. Tansen Samaro in Gwalior. So those are some events that if you have some time to travel and stay for 2 or 3 days, it's an experience.
Captain Mohan Narayan wants to know why you switched from Carnatic to Hindustani.
I think I love Carnatic music, but I think once I started to learn Hindustani music, I was drawn to the style and I would say it just resonated more with me, especially the space, the slower tempo and the space for improvisation and the way the rag was kind of unfolded. The pacing and that kind of the space in which you can really leisurely explore a rag is something I was very drawn to.
I love the story of Yogesh ji's, tabla playing as a child. I think it really has to be something that he inherited. So thank you very much for sharing that. And of course, Rishabh says that we would like to meet him, and I would join him in saying that we would love to hear him or meet him sometime.
Yes. I hope to do some discussion about with the artists present or
With
something.
the artist present, yes. Maybe we could have a live performance at Khaki Lab sometime.
Yeah.
Yeah, and when we were seeing Comic G perform, it was really like the music was in every fiber of his being. It was really like he came down from 80 years to 40 years or something when he was performing. It was really nice to see that. Captain Mohan Narayan also wants to know that if you could tell him in brief the genesis of the Bhendi Bazaar Gharana.
Okay. I think I'm not the expert on this, but musicians in this area of actually near Crawford Market, there's an interesting story. There's musicians that were originally from business families who lived in that area, kind of developed this style, and the main figure of the style was Ustad Aman Ali Khan Sahab. It had some interesting features and influences, I would say, a little bit from Sargam, from Carnatic music, and some other ornamental features. But the name Bhendi Bazaar came because at that time the British kept calling that area behind the bazaar, behind this market, and then that got changed to Bhendi Bazaar. That is what the musicians of the Gharana say. So, I mean, that's a little bit about the name of the Gharana, but musicians, the most famous figure of it, I would say, is Ustad Aman Ali Khan Sahab.
Captain again asks whether Vidwan Narayan Iyer's earlier training in Carnatic music influenced his switch to the violin in Hindustani music, because the Carnatic music adopted the violin before the Hindustani music did.
Yes. So I asked Kalaji about this, and seems very plausible, but she didn't know what specifically made him choose the violin as his instrument. But one interesting thing she mentioned is one reason she also wanted his children to learn Carnatic Hindustani, because he knew they were all going to be violinists and he didn't want them to be in competing kind of areas of music. So he was very kind of strategic in making his son T.N. Krishnan, very famous Carnatic violinist in the Carnatic style, and Rajamji in the Hindustani style.
Oh, that's interesting.
Yes.
And it was really nice to hear you talk about how she chose the viola strings. It's like you said, there are so many rules that bind music. I think you have to reach a certain level of accomplishment before you can even consider deviating from those rules and bringing in your personal. It was really nice to hear that.
Yes.
Milind mentions that he'd like to hear something about the history of music for the last 700-800 years and how music emerged and how it stayed even during the wars to take control of the country. Of course, Milind, that's way beyond the scope of both her book and her talk, but if you'd like to say something about that.
I think I agree with you. I mean, it's a huge topic. I don't know if I can even, I don't want to even attempt a brief kind of summarizing of that, but yes, perhaps in another session.
Perhaps in another session. I think Nandini asks a question which you already answered, about your switch from Hindustani music to Hindustani from Carnatic. But she does have an interesting question. Do you think it's even possible to pursue a career in music if you've studied something else at university? Are you already too old? Maybe like a tennis player or whatever, you're too old, or is that possible?
I think it's definitely possible. We can take the examples from the book. Sudhindra Bhaumikji studied engineering, and he learned music. I would say to start music late is very tough, but people do it. I didn't study music in university either. I mean, I've grown up learning music, and many musicians learn. I think the education of music, especially in this kind of music, isn't something that happens in the universities. It's the one-on-one training where if you want to be a performer, that's really required, because in the institution you won't get that necessarily. That's a good foundation. I have no issues at all with institutional education, but as a performer or a career, you need more than that probably.
Lots of compliments for you as well for the talk. If you would just share your book again and let people know, it's A Call of Music. If you'd let people know where they can buy it, I know that it's available on Amazon.
Yes. Yeah, it's available on Amazon. So I think
Bhavya, that should answer your question. Thank you, Aarti, for compliments. Captain Mohan Narayan says that he has a bucket list for you to put out a book on a definitive book on the comparative study of Hindustani and Carnatic, since you've learned both, and
sure.
that you will be able to put together something like that for us and really enrich the world of music with putting together the knowledge which is sort of sitting out there and which needs to be captured. And
Sure.
as Dylan says, then we can plan a session on this. Thank you so much. It was
Thank you so much.
an amazing talk, and I love the interspersing of music. Zoom can be really terrible sometimes with playing music, so I need to thank the gods of music for letting that go through today. Thank you very much to you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for our audience for joining in, and see you all next week again. And thank you.
Thank you.